It happened on a Sunday morning after I wrapped up a brutal 6-hour construction shift that started before sunrise. My shoulders were on fire, my lower back felt like it was locked in place, and my hands still smelled faintly of dust and metal no matter how much I scrubbed them. All I wanted was a hot shower, a few hours of sleep, and maybe the leftover Chinese food sitting in our fridge. But my husband kept texting. The first message came at 8 a.m., then another at 9:30, and finally at 10:45, just 3 question marks. I hadn't checked my phone all morning. I was on the job, up on scaffolding, focused, tired. Still, guilt settled into my chest the moment I saw those messages. So I did what I'd done so many times before. I showed up. I showered fast, pulled on clean jeans and a shirt, and drove from the valley to West Hollywood, running on fumes. I parked 4 blocks away, because of course I did, and walked toward the restaurant, trying to pull myself together. The dependable wife, the one who never fit in with his world, but showed up anyway. From half a block away, I could hear the laughter, loud, performative, the kind meant to be noticed. The patio was packed, mimosas everywhere, designer sunglasses, plates of food that cost more than I made in a couple of hours. Everyone looked relaxed, unbothered, like Sunday brunch was the most natural thing in the world. My husband sat at a corner table with 4 of his friends. He didn't stand when he saw me, didn't smile, didn't wave. He just flicked his hand toward the empty chair, like I was late to his event, not someone who had been working since before dawn. I sat down quietly, feeling like an extra chair someone had added at the last second. The conversation didn't pause. No one asked how work was. No one acknowledged the exhaustion written all over my body. They were already deep into planning a girls' trip. Palm Springs, spas, hotel upgrades, numbers being thrown around like they were nothing. I ordered black coffee. And then, laughing into her mimosa, my husband said it, loud enough for the table, loud enough for nearby diners to hear. Honestly, I give this marriage 6 more months, tops. The table erupted in laughter. And in that moment, while everyone laughed, while my husband soaked in the attention, I realized something terrifyingly clear. This wasn't a joke. This was a rehearsal, and I was the punchline. I'm 34. I've worked construction since I was 19, starting as the person who carried what everyone else didn't want to carry, then learning the trade piece by piece until I became someone crews could rely on. It's not glamorous. It's early mornings, aching joints, sunburns you don't notice until the shower hits, and paychecks that look smaller than the effort it took to earn them. But it's honest. And for a long time, I thought honesty was enough to build a marriage on. My husband's name is Ethan. We met at a friend of a friend birthday party, one of those rooftop gatherings where the music is too loud and everyone's pretending they're not sweating. I almost didn't go. I'd been on a site all day, dust still caught in my hairline, boots scuffed, hands rough. I remember standing in front of my bathroom mirror, staring at my own reflection, thinking, "You're going to stick out. You always do." But I went anyway. Ethan found me by the drink table, and he made it feel easy. He wasn't the loudest person in the room. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He leaned in and asked what I did, and when I told him, he didn't make a face. He didn't joke about it. He didn't do that thing people do where their eyes slide away, like your job is something they can't picture themselves touching. Instead, he smiled like he actually respected it. "Construction," he said, like he was tasting the word. "That's real work." And I remember thinking, almost embarrassingly fast, finally, someone who sees me. We started dating a week later. At first, he didn't mind my schedule. He thought it was kind of sexy, I think. The idea of a woman who could handle herself, who didn't need saving. He'd send playful texts while I was on the job. He'd meet me after work and rub lotion into the cracks on my hands like it was intimate instead of practical. I fell hard. Not because he was perfect, but because he felt different from everyone else I'd dated. He worked in a world I didn't fully understand. Marketing adjacent, PR adjacent, networking events, brunches with industry people. Everything sounded like it came with a dress code. He talked about contacts and opportunities the way I talked about tools and deadlines. And somehow he made it sound like we were going to be this power couple. Two people from different worlds meeting in the middle. For the first year, he did meet me in the middle. He'd come to my neighborhood instead of always pulling me into his. He'd eat tacos out of foil wrappers and say it was the best meal he'd had all week. He'd laugh when my coworkers called him pretty boy and kiss me like he didn't care what anyone thought. So when he proposed, I said yes without hesitation. He did it in our living room, not some elaborate public spectacle. Just him, nervous, holding out a small box with shaking fingers. "I know I'm not always good at showing it," he said, voice tight, "but you're the best thing in my life." The ring was beautiful, simple, clean, like him. I cried. The ugly kind. The kind you can't control. And for a while, I really believed we were building something real. We got married within a year. Nothing huge, no extravagant venue, no 5-course meal. We tried to be responsible. We bought a house in the valley because it made sense. It was close enough to his world and closer to mine. A compromise. And in the beginning, it worked. But slowly, so slowly, I didn't notice it happening. Ethan started treating my life like a phase. My early mornings became an inconvenience. My calluses became something he joked about. He'd say things like, "You're always exhausted," but not in a caring way. More like I was failing some invisible test. Then came the comments from his friends. They were polite to my face, mostly. Compliments that didn't feel like compliments. "Oh my God, I could never wake up that early," one of them would say. Eyes wide like I was describing prison. "Construction? That's intense," another would add, like I'd told them I wrestled bears for a living. And Ethan would laugh along. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Social awkwardness, different lifestyles, no big deal. But the truth was, when I was standing next to them, I could feel myself shrinking. They spoke a language I didn't. They traded stories about trips, fancy restaurants, hotel upgrades. They'd name-drop people I'd never heard of and places I'd never been. And Ethan loved it. He loved being the person at the center of that circle. He loved performing. Somewhere along the way, I stopped being his partner and started being his hardworking wife. His proof that he was grounded. His little inspirational story. And I ignored every small moment that hinted at what was coming. The way he'd sigh when I said I couldn't do Sunday brunch because I had a shift Monday. The way he'd roll his eyes when I asked how much something cost. The way he'd say, "It's not a big deal," when it was a big deal to me. The way he'd text me on job sites like I was a personal assistant instead of a person. And the worst part, I kept trying harder. I kept telling myself, if I just show up more, if I just fit in more, if I just don't make him feel embarrassed, because I loved him, because I believed marriage meant showing up even when you didn't have the energy, which is exactly why that Sunday brunch hit me like a punch to the throat. Not because he joked, but because the joke sounded like a plan, like something he'd said before in safer rooms to people who would laugh and nod and cheer him on. And the realization I didn't want to face started whispering louder in my head. I wasn't hearing the first cruel thing he'd ever said. I was hearing the first one he was brave enough to say in front of me. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. They didn't arrive all at once. They slipped in quietly, disguised as jokes, scheduling conflicts, little moments I brushed off because I didn't want to be that wife. The suspicious one, the insecure one, the one who made problems where there weren't any. Ethan started being busy in ways that didn't include me. Not working late, not stuck in traffic, busy socially, group dinners I wouldn't enjoy, networking events I wouldn't fit into, weekends that somehow filled themselves without my name on them. When I asked, he'd smile and say, "It's just easier this way." Like he was doing us both a favor. I noticed it first in how he talked about time. My time was something to be managed. His time was something to be protected. If I got home late from a site, exhausted and sore, he'd barely look up from his phone. If he had brunch plans, spa plans, wine nights, it was treated like something sacred. I started eating dinner alone more often. At first, I didn't mind. I told myself this was just adulthood. Two people with different schedules. Normal. Healthy. But then came the comments. Little things. He'd look at my boots by the door and say, "You know, if you worked in an office, you wouldn't track so much dirt inside." He'd wrinkle his nose at the smell of sawdust on my jacket. Once, when one of his friends asked why I never came on trips with them, Ethan laughed and said, "She wouldn't survive a spa weekend. She's too hardcore." Everyone laughed. I smiled too. But something tightened in my chest. Then there were his friends. I didn't hate them, not really. But I always felt like I was standing on the wrong side of a glass wall with them. Close enough to see, not close enough to belong. Jessica especially. She had a way of speaking that sounded friendly until you replayed it in your head later. "You're so strong," she'd say, glancing at my arms. I could never live like that. Live like what? Another time. Ethan deserves someone who matches his lifestyle. You know, someone flexible. She'd say it smiling, sipping wine, like it was just an observation. And Ethan never shut it down. Not once. He'd chuckle, shrug, change the subject. That silence was louder than any insult. The house started to feel different too. I was still paying most of the mortgage, covering the bulk of the bills. It made sense. My income was steadier. I didn't mind. I'd never kept score. But suddenly, money became something he joked about with his friends. "Oh, she's the responsible one," he'd say. "I'd be homeless without her." Everyone laughed. I didn't. Because responsibility isn't supposed to be a punchline. I started noticing how often he drank when he was with them, how animated he became, louder, sharper, more sarcastic. Like he was performing a version of himself that didn't include me. At home, he was quieter, detached, on his phone constantly. Sometimes I'd catch him smiling at messages, and when I asked what was funny, he'd say, "Just group chat stuff." And I'd let it go. Because trusting your spouse is supposed to be the default. Because marriage is supposed to be safe. But the tension kept building. I could feel it in my body before I could name it in my head. The tightness in my shoulders didn't go away, even on days off. My sleep got lighter. I started replaying conversations while brushing my teeth, while driving, while lying in bed next to him. I told myself I was tired, overworked, overthinking. I didn't want to believe the alternative, that my husband had already started emotionally exiting our marriage, and I was just the last one to find out. So when he texted me repeatedly that Sunday morning about brunch, something felt off, not urgent, insistent, like he needed me there for a reason he wasn't saying. I should have trusted that feeling, but I didn't. I showed up anyway. And that brunch, that table, that laugh, it wasn't the beginning of the end. It was the moment all the quiet warning signs lined up and finally made sense. The moment stretched longer than it should have. After Ethan said it, honestly, I give this marriage 6 more months, tops. The laughter came fast and loud, like it had been waiting for permission. Glasses clinked, someone slapped the table. A couple at the next table glanced over, curious, then went back to their phones. I stayed still, not frozen. Aware. Every sound sharpened, the scrape of cutlery, the hiss of the espresso machine behind the bar, the hum of traffic on Sunset. My heartbeat climbed up into my throat, steady but heavy, like it was knocking from the inside. Ethan leaned back in his chair, mimosa lifted, smiling like he'd just nailed a punchline. He was enjoying this, the attention, the validation. "Let's be real," he added, smirking. "We're just heading in different directions." Different directions. He said it like a quarterly review that didn't go his way. Calm, amused, detached. The laughter came again, louder this time. "Oh my God, you've been patient way too long," one of them said, shaking her head like she felt sorry for him. "I wouldn't deal with that," another chimed in, lifting her glass. "Life's too short." "You deserve so much better," a third added, squeezing Ethan's hand in performative sympathy. No one looked at me. Not once. I wasn't a person in that moment. I was an idea, a story, a problem they were all bonding over. I set my coffee cup down slowly. My hands were steady, but my chest felt tight, compressed, like someone had wrapped a band around my ribs and pulled. I scanned the table, faces flushed from alcohol and self-satisfaction, eyes bright with the thrill of collective judgment. Ethan sat in the center of it all, basking. Something shifted in my head then. Not shock. Clarity. This wasn't new. The way they laughed, too quick, too comfortable, told me everything. They'd heard this before, probably more than once. I'd just never been there to listen. How many brunches had I missed? How many wine nights? How many conversations where my name came up and my absence made it easier? The hardworking wife. The dull one. The obstacle. The noise at the table faded into a low hum as they sipped their drinks. I waited for the laughter to die down. Then I spoke. 6 months, huh? The silence hit hard. Every head turned toward me at once, like I'd broken some unspoken rule. Ethan's smile stayed frozen on his face, but his eyes widened. His glass stopped halfway to his mouth. I met his gaze, calm, steady. You're being generous, I said. I give it 6 minutes. Someone let out a nervous laugh, then stopped when they realized I wasn't joking. I reached for my ring. It slid off easily. Too easily. I'd lost weight without noticing. Early mornings, long shifts, stress I'd been pretending wasn't there. I placed the ring in the center of the table. It made a small, sharp sound when it hit the wood. A sound that somehow cut through everything else. Then I stood. The chair scraped loudly against the patio floor, raw and harsh. No one spoke. No one moved. I looked at each of his friends, one by one. Every single one of them looked away. Finally, I looked at Ethan. His face had drained of color, then flushed unevenly, panic bleeding through the confidence. Enjoy your brunch, I said quietly. What? His voice cracked. Babe, wait. I was joking. He reached for me across the table, nearly knocking over a water glass. I stepped back. It was just talk, he said quickly. Just friends. Don't be so dramatic. I glanced around the table. Plates half eaten, mimosas untouched now. The bold, laughing audience from minutes ago had vanished, replaced by embarrassed silence. 6 months is kind, I said, my voice steady even though it didn't sound like mine anymore. 6 minutes is real. I left the ring where it was. Then I turned and walked away. Not rushing, not slamming anything, just walking through the noise, through the stairs, out into the sunlight, like this was any other Sunday. Like my marriage hadn't just ended in a crowded restaurant. The sunlight outside hit harder than I expected. Too bright, too hot. Like the world hadn't gotten the memo that something inside me had just cracked open. I slipped my sunglasses on out of instinct and started walking toward where I'd parked, 4 blocks away on a quiet side street. My pace was steady, almost unnervingly so. Not fast, not slow, just controlled. Behind me, I heard the restaurant door swing open. Wait! Ethan's voice cut through the noise, sharp and panicked. I didn't turn around. I heard footsteps for half a block, then traffic swallowed the sound. Maybe he stopped. Maybe he didn't. Either way, I kept going. My truck was exactly where I'd left it, shaded by a thin tree that did nothing against the heat. I unlocked the door, climbed in, and locked it again immediately, like that thin layer of metal could protect me from everything I was holding in. That's when the shaking started. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, violent and sudden, like my body was finally allowed to react now that the decision had been made. My chest tightened. My breath came shallow and fast. I closed my eyes. In through your nose, count to 4. Out through your mouth, count to 4. Something I'd learned years ago in a stress management class on a job site. I followed the rhythm until the edges softened just enough for me to think. My phone buzzed. Ethan's name lit up the screen. I declined the call. Another buzz. Another. I stared at the phone like it was something dangerous, like answering it would undo everything I'd just done. I couldn't stay there. He knew my truck. He knew my habits. I started the engine and drove. No destination, just away. I ended up in a Target parking lot a couple of miles out, pulling into a far corner where no one parked. I shut the engine off and sat in silence, the hum of the world muted behind closed windows. The phone wouldn't stop. Buzz after buzz. vibration after vibration. I finally looked. 8 messages. Where did you go? Come back right now. This is ridiculous. You're embarrassing me. Please, can we just talk? Answer me. The messages kept stacking. Then the calls started again. I let them ring out one by one. Finally, a new text appeared. Please, can we just talk? Lowercase. Rushed. Different. I stared at that one longer than the rest. I could picture him. Friends gone, confidence evaporated, mascara streaked from panic tears he never expected to shed. Left with the check. Left with the silence. I typed one sentence. There's nothing left to talk about, and hit send. The phone rang immediately. I hesitated. Then I answered. Where are you? His voice was thick with crying. Traffic noise bled through the line. You can't be serious. Everyone's staring at me. You humiliated me. That's not my problem anymore, I said. My voice sounded flat, hollow, like it belonged to someone else. You're really throwing our marriage away over one stupid joke? You threw it away, I replied quietly. I just stopped pretending. Please, he said, come back. We can fix this. I'll come by tomorrow for my things. Silence. Then a broken sound, half gasp, half cry. What? No, you can't just... I hung up. Blocked the number. The screen confirmed it in simple text. This contact has been blocked. I leaned my head back against the headrest and stared at the ceiling of my truck. Sat there for 10 minutes, just breathing, just existing. 5 years. Done in 6 minutes at a brunch table. Eventually, I started the engine again. I didn't drive home. I couldn't face the house, not yet. All the shared furniture, the photos, the life he'd been quietly planning to dismantle without me. Instead, I drove across town to Marcus's place. I knocked around 1 in the afternoon. He opened the door holding a beer, football playing behind him. He took one look at my face and stepped aside without asking a single question. You need the couch? He asked once the door was closed. Maybe longer. You've got it. And just like that, I wasn't alone anymore. But the truth was, I'd already crossed a line I couldn't go back from. And for the first time in a long time, that didn't scare me. The first night on Marcus's couch felt unreal. The apartment smelled like pizza, beer, and something citrusy he used to clean the counters. Normal, uncomplicated things. The TV played a football game on mute, players colliding silently while I stared at the screen without really seeing it. Marcus knew better than to push. He always had. We sat there for hours without talking, the kind of silence that doesn't feel awkward, just necessary. Around 6, he ordered pizza without asking, pepperoni and sausage, extra cheese, comfort food without commentary. I barely tasted it. My phone, however, was impossible to ignore. I'd blocked Ethan's number, but that didn't stop the messages. They started coming in from unfamiliar numbers. At first, I didn't understand what was happening. Then the pattern became obvious. His friends, borrowed phones, group chats I wasn't part of until now. Some messages were angry. You didn't have to humiliate him like that. That was cruel and unnecessary. You embarrassed everyone. Others were pleading. He's devastated. He didn't mean it. You're overreacting. A few tried to sound reasonable, logical, like they were mediating a business dispute instead of the collapse of a marriage. One message stood out. It was from Jessica. That was harsh and uncalled for. He was just venting. Everyone does that. You're being completely unreasonable. I stared at the screen, reading it twice. Venting about his own marriage. In public. With witnesses. I didn't reply. The messages kept coming. Accusations shifted quickly. When guilt didn't work, blame took its place. According to them, I was dramatic, cold, unstable, too sensitive. I should have talked it out privately. I should have been more understanding. I should have known he was joking. Every message made one thing clearer. This wasn't panic over losing me. This was panic over losing control of the narrative. I turned my phone completely off. That night, sleep came in fragments. I'd close my eyes and see the brunch table, hear the laughter, feel the weight of the ring sliding off my finger. over and over, like my mind was making sure I never forgot what clarity felt like. The next morning, my phone buzzed again. I'd turned it back on without thinking, muscle memory. 6:47 a.m. A text from an unknown number. "This is Rachel from yesterday. Can we talk? It's important." Rachel. I had to think for a second. Then I remembered, the quiet one, the friend who barely spoke at brunch, the one who didn't laugh, who watched instead of performed. I showed the message to Marcus while he stood in the kitchen, hair sticking up, wearing an old t-shirt that had definitely seen better days. He shrugged. Might be worth hearing her out. Information is power. He was right. I texted back. About what? The reply came instantly. Not over text. Coffee. 8 a.m. Starbucks on Ventura. I agreed. That meeting changed everything. Rachel didn't look like she had at brunch. No makeup, hair pulled back, jeans and a sweatshirt, tired eyes. She sat across from me without ordering anything and folded her hands on the table like she'd rehearsed what she needed to say. "I couldn't sleep last night," she said. "You need to know something." And then she told me the truth. Ethan had been talking about divorce for months, consulting a lawyer, planning an exit, strategizing how to make me look like the one who walked away first, claim abandonment, secure sympathy, secure assets. She showed me screenshots, group chats, messages, jokes at my expense, plans written out like bullet points in a business proposal. "He's predictable," one message read. "She'll never actually leave." My stomach dropped. Rachel told me she'd already left the group chat, that her husband had gone through something similar years ago and she recognized the pattern, that she was willing to testify to everything if it came to that. By the time I left that Starbucks, my hands were shaking again, but this time not from shock, from resolve. That afternoon, I was sitting in a Beverly Hills law office. The attorney, Ms. Rivera, was calm, sharp, unflinching. She reviewed the screenshots with the kind of expression that said she'd seen this exact situation more times than she could count. "You did the right thing," she said finally. "And you did it publicly. That matters." She laid out the next steps. File first. Separate finances immediately. No direct contact. Let her handle communication. By Tuesday morning, Ethan was served with divorce papers. And that's when the real escalation began. Calls to Marcus. Messages through mutual acquaintances. Sudden stories circulating about how I'd abandoned him. But this time, I wasn't scrambling to explain. I had evidence. And for the first time since that brunch, the ground under my feet felt solid again. Wednesday evening was the lowest point. Ms. Rivera had arranged everything. Time, date, police escort, so I could collect my belongings from the house without drama. On paper, it was controlled. Professional, safe. Emotionally, it felt like walking into a grave I hadn't finished digging yet. Marcus drove. I stared out the window the entire way, watching familiar streets blur past. This neighborhood had once meant home. Now it felt like a place I'd outgrown without realizing it. Ethan's car was in the driveway when we pulled up. My stomach tightened. Before I could knock, the front door opened. He stood there barefoot, wearing old sweatpants and a wrinkled t-shirt. No makeup, obviously, but his eyes were red, swollen, rimmed with exhaustion. He looked smaller somehow, stripped of the confidence he'd worn so easily at brunch. "Can we please just," he started, voice breaking. The officer stepped forward calmly. "Ma'am, we're here so she can collect her belongings as arranged." Ethan froze. I walked past him without a word. The house smelled the same, lemon cleaner, fabric softener. Familiar and wrong at the same time. Every room felt like it was holding its breath. I moved mechanically. Clothes from the closet, work boots, tools from the garage, laptop, chargers, personal items from the bathroom. 40 minutes. That's all it took to pack up 5 years. Marcus carried boxes silently, efficient and steady. The officer stayed near the doorway, neutral presence, eyes alert. Ethan didn't move. He stood in the doorway the entire time, watching, crying openly now. Not the dramatic kind, just quiet, defeated sobs that echoed through the house. And still, I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not anger, just a hollow, aching emptiness where love used to be. On my final trip out, he grabbed my arm. "I didn't mean any of it," he said desperately. "I was just showing off for them. Please." I stopped. Turned. Looked at him. Really looked at him. For the first time since the brunch. "Then you showed them exactly who you are," I said. I pulled my arm free. We drove away. That night, back on Marcus's couch, the weight of everything finally crashed down on me. The adrenaline was gone. The certainty faded. All that remained was grief. I cried quietly into a borrowed blanket, staring at the dark ceiling. What if I'd misunderstood? What if I'd overreacted? What if I'd destroyed something that could have been fixed? My phone buzzed once, then went still. Rachel's evidence sat in my messages like a lifeline and a wound all at once. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that this had been planned. Still, knowing didn't erase the pain. It only sharpened it. I realized something terrifying that night. I hadn't just lost a marriage. I'd lost the version of myself who believed loyalty would always be returned. And for a few hours, alone in the dark, I wasn't strong. I was just human. Morning came quietly. Sunlight slipped through the blinds of Marcus's apartment, landing across the floor in thin, pale lines. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. My body felt heavy, like I'd been carrying something all night, even in my sleep. Then it came back to me. The brunch, the ring, the screenshots, the house that wasn't mine anymore. I sat up slowly, rubbing my face with both hands. My eyes burned, swollen from crying, but my chest felt calmer. Not healed, just steadier. My phone buzzed. Not Ethan. "Rachel, just checking in. How are you holding up?" I stared at the message longer than I needed to. Still standing, I typed back, "Thank you for everything." Her reply came a minute later. "You did the hardest part already. Walking away." Those words stayed with me. Later that afternoon, Ms. Rivera called. Her voice was crisp, efficient, grounding in the best way. "She's trying to claim you abandoned her financially," she said, "but the evidence doesn't support that. Not even close." She walked me through it calmly. The payment history, the bank statements, the mortgage. 70% of the bills consistently paid by me. Her hidden job loss. Her credit card debt she'd never disclosed. "The judge won't be impressed," Ms. Rivera said bluntly, "and she knows it. That's why the pressure will increase before it stops." And it did. Messages through friends. Emails sent and unsent. Rumors floating around about how I was cold and calculating. I didn't respond. For the first time, I wasn't trying to explain myself to people who had already decided who I was. That was the shift. Not some dramatic revenge moment. Not a speech. Not closure delivered in a perfect sentence. Just a quiet decision. I don't need their approval to move forward. That same day, I opened a new bank account. Changed my direct deposit. Set up a P.O. box so nothing important could be intercepted. Small, practical steps, but each one felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Control, stability, boundaries. A week later, Rachel texted again. The brunch group had fallen apart. 3 of the 4 friends had distanced themselves from Ethan after seeing the screenshots. Only Jessica stayed. Ethan had tried hosting a wine night to salvage things. Only one person showed up. I didn't feel satisfied. I felt tired. And strangely, free. That night, I sat on Marcus's balcony alone, watching the city lights flicker on one by one. The air was cool, quiet. No one was demanding anything from me. I thought about how long I'd spent shrinking myself, making excuses, trying to fit into a life that was quietly rejecting me. And for the first time, I didn't wonder what he was doing. I wondered what I wanted. The answer wasn't big or dramatic. I wanted peace. And I was finally ready to choose it. The fallout didn't come all at once. It arrived in fragments. Updates I didn't ask for, stories that reached me through other people, consequences that unfolded quietly while I focused on rebuilding my own life. 2 weeks after the brunch, Rachel texted again. "Just so you know," she wrote, "the group is basically done." She explained that after she shared the screenshots, After she laid out the planning, the manipulation, the way Ethan had been talking about me for months, everything shifted. 3 of the 4 friends distanced themselves almost immediately. They didn't want their names anywhere near something that calculated. Only Jessica stayed. Ethan tried to hold things together, hosted a wine night at the house, hoping to reset the narrative, hoping familiarity would override discomfort. Only Jessica showed up. I read the message, set my phone down, and felt nothing. No triumph. No satisfaction. Just a quiet confirmation that I'd walked away at the right time. Through Marcus's network, coworkers, mutual acquaintances, people who crossed paths with Ethan socially, I heard more. He'd moved back in with his parents, lost his job, the unemployment he'd hidden from me, the debt he'd buried, it all surfaced at once. Credit card balances higher than I'd ever known, bills piling up, a lifestyle he'd been maintaining with appearances and borrowed time. According to Marcus, Ethan had planned to make all of that my problem. She was going to dump it on you in court, Marcus told me one night over beers. Job loss, debt, everything. Make you look like the bad guy who walked out. By the 3rd month, Miss Rivera called with an update. She's trying to claim financial abandonment, she said, but the documentation doesn't support her narrative at all. You were the primary earner. You paid 70% of the household expenses consistently. The judge, apparently, was not impressed. The settlement came together quickly after that. I kept my truck, my tools, my savings. Ethan kept the house, but with minimal equity and the full mortgage payment. All the credit card debt stayed with him. No alimony, clean break. We signed in separate rooms at the courthouse. I never saw him that day. I didn't need to. 1 month after the brunch, I moved out of Marcus's place into a small studio in Van Nuys. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean, quiet, and affordable. 20 minutes from work, close enough to everything that mattered. I took extra shifts when they were offered, saved aggressively, built a routine that didn't revolve around anyone else's expectations. Work, gym, home, sleep, peace. 4 months after everything ended, my supervisor pulled me aside. "We're creating a new lead position," he said. "Better hours, salary instead of hourly. I think you'd be a good fit." I didn't hesitate. The promotion became official 2 weeks later. The first thing I did with the raise was move to a better apartment. 1 bedroom this time, with a small patio. The first place that felt completely mine. Ethan faded into the background. According to Marcus, he was still posting vague victim narratives online. Fewer likes, fewer comments. People had moved on. So had I. And without trying to punish him, without saying a word, the life he'd built on appearances collapsed under its own weight. 7 months after that Sunday brunch, I was standing in my kitchen with the windows open, evening light spilling across the counter. Michael was beside me, chopping vegetables, completely focused, hair tucked behind one ear. I stirred pasta sauce on the stove, adding herbs, the smell warm and grounding. It was an easy rhythm we'd fallen into. No tension, no performance, no unspoken rules. "Do you ever think about that day?" he asked casually, not looking up. I paused, tasted the sauce, considered the question honestly. "Sometimes," I said. "Not like before. Less and less." "Does it still hurt?" I thought about it. "No," I said finally. "Not anymore." He nodded like he understood exactly what that meant. We carried our plates out to the small patio and sat down as the city lights came on, one by one, distant and soft. The conversation drifted, from work to books to nothing important at all. Comfortable silence filled the gaps, the kind that doesn't need explaining. Earlier that week, I'd run into Rachel at Target. She'd been with her 2 young boys, both of them energetic and loud, tugging at her sleeves. She smiled when she saw me. "You look good," she said, like, actually happy. I realized she was right. Marcus noticed it too. One night over beers, he mentioned he'd heard through the grapevine that Ethan was still living with his parents, working part-time retail. He'd dated someone briefly, but it hadn't lasted. Still posting online, still framing himself as the victim, but fewer people were listening. "You don't care at all, do you?" Marcus asked, studying my face. "Not even," and I meant it. Back on the patio, Michael laughed at something I said, warm and unguarded. I felt something settle in my chest, a sense of rightness I hadn't known I was missing. This was what it was supposed to feel like. Not drama, not negotiation, not proving your worth to someone who's already planning your exit. Just two people choosing each other, without an audience. My phone buzzed with a work email. Monday's schedule. Nothing urgent. I set it face down. Tomorrow I'd go to a job I'd earned through hard work. I'd come home to a place I'd built myself. Maybe see Michael, maybe not. Either way, I'd be fine. Because I'd learned something that took me years and one public moment of clarity to understand. You can't build a future with someone who's secretly planning your exit. You can't love someone into respecting you. And you can't win a game you didn't know you were playing. But you can walk away. Not in anger, not in revenge, just in quiet certainty that you deserved better. And then you build that better life. One day, one choice at a time.